So I've got an image up in Lightroom that I want to print, and I want to use the profile that we just created. I loaded actually 13 by 19 size paper of the same paper type into my printer because I want to get a nice big print. I need to see with soft proofing how my printer profile is going to affect the image. And this is a very intense image, and I want to make sure the color and the tone is the best it can be. So let's go through the process. I bring up my image, and the first thing I'm going to do is click on soft proofing. Now, if you don't already have another copy of it, it will ask you, do you want to create a soft proofing copy? It's just a virtual copy in Lightroom, so go ahead and go with it. And it shows us defaulting the Adobe RGB. Well, that's not our profile. We need to go get our paper profile. And it's currently not loaded, so since it's a brand new profile, I have to click on Other, and it will show you a list of all the profiles in your computer. And here's our CMP equals RAG Photo Canson Epson P600. So I'm going to add that, and then it shows up in here. Now underneath you have the two rendering intents, perceptual and relative colorimetric. Let's click on both of them and see if there's a difference. So we click on perceptual, that's that. Click on relative, and what's interesting is there's a very slight difference for this particular paper. Just to see what happens when you have a different kind of paper, let's choose a different paper. Let's get this vellum rag, and we can see in here, perceptual versus relative, it's a very different result because this paper doesn't have the depth of color that the paper that we're using has right now. So let's go back to our profile that we created. Let's add our custom paper profile, relative, and it's a very minor difference. If you take a look at the histogram above, as they change, it's very slightly different. But what the histogram is saying is that relative is giving us a little bit more depth in the shadow, so that's fine. Also up in the histogram, you have a button here that you can click on, and if there's any colors that are beyond what this particular image can show on your monitor, it will show you that. And then on the right side, you've got the colors that the printer cannot print. In this case, it's a bigger thing. So you see when I click on this, this entire area turns red. That is showing us that those are the colors that are beyond the gamut for the printer paper combination. So those colors are going to move. But by having soft proofing turned on, we get to see what those colors will be. Now we can make edits should we decide that we want to make this print a little bit more intense or make some more adjustments. So if I want to, let's say I want to bring up the clarity a little bit and boost the saturation a little more. And yeah, I kind of like what that just did. And everything actually else, let me go ahead and add a minor highlight vignette to the edges. And I'm going to bring the mid-tone exposure up just a little bit. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now again, with soft proofing turned on, we are looking at the print through the paper profile before we even print it. That's the beautiful thing, because now this is what it's going to come out on the paper. Having a custom paper profile allows me to do this. Now this paper is not cheap. This is a really, really fine art paper. So I'd like to have it come out right the first time. So I've got my soft proofing. We decided relative colorimetric was the correct rendering intent. So now I can go to the print module. So let's go to print, and there's my print shown on paper. I do have to tell it again what we decided. So if I go to print job, I need to tell it the correct profile, and I have to reload it in for some reason to tell it that's the profile I'm going to use. I also decided relative. Now, I don't want to do any print adjustment because we just did a profile for this and we have a profiled monitor. So we know what we see on the screen is as accurate as it can be. We know the paper print is going to be as accurate as it can be. So we don't want any print adjustment. We do want to use 16-bit output, and print sharpening and media type is matte. And then we can just click on, let me just check my print settings real quick. Let's see, let's go to printer settings. We want to change that to our ultra premium presentation. I'm going to turn on Super Photo, and I'm going to save this as a preset for RAG Photographique. so that it'll always be there for me. Hit OK. Click on Save. Let me just double check my page setup. I am set for 13 by 19 paper. Great. And I click on Print, and off it goes to the printer. Now, when you're going to evaluate your print after the print comes out, remember two things. One, let the print dry 10 minutes because it's probably going to darken just a little bit. And lastly, view it under daylight conditions. Either with daylight bulbs, which I do have lamps that have daylight bulbs in it, but it's a bright sunny day, I can just roll up my blinds and take a look, and we'll compare what I see from the light coming through the window versus what I see on the screen. So we'll take a look at our printer, and our print rather, and when that's done, we'll do the same thing with a different image in Photoshop. So I brought an image into print into Photoshop, and let's see the soft proofing in Photoshop. It's a little more involved, but it also gives you a little bit more capabilities for making changes since you have all of the layer abilities of Photoshop. So to do that, we go to View, Proof Setup, Custom. And you get this customized proof condition window, and the device to simulate right now just says Adobe 1999 or Adobe RGB. We want it to be our paper profile. So we click on there, scroll down, and get our paper profile. And there it is. There's the one we created. And you can see the advantage of, if you're going to create your own profiles, of putting some kind of prefix on it. I use CMP for Color Monkey Photo because in the list it just makes it easier to find all of your custom profiles. So I apply that, and immediately you see a change. Now, I also have the rendering intents here. In Photoshop, there are 4 choices. You want to avoid saturation and absolute color metric. They shouldn't even be there for average photographers, just perceptual and relative. So we're going to use those 2, and we're going to flip back and forth. And as we do, we see a change. And the fact that there's a change means that there is color out of gamut fairly seriously because it's causing a big change in the image. So we'll bounce back and forth, and relative color metric is darker, but I like the brightness and pop of perceptual, but I want to get a little more of my shadows back. So I'm going to leave it on perceptual, and then I'm going to make some adjustments to the image. By the way, there's a couple other options here. Underneath the rendering intent, it does say black point compensation. Yes, that should be turned on. However, underneath that, and you'll see this both in Lightroom and in Photoshop, you've got simulate paper color and simulate black ink. Don't like it. It does a really poor job of really showing you how the print is going to look. In fact, if I turn it on here, simulate paper color, it looks very washed out on the screen, when in reality this print's going to be very intense. So this is one piece of Photoshop and Lightroom soft proofing. It just doesn't work very well. I recommend you avoid it. So we'll leave that off, and I hit OK. Now we are now looking at the image through its profile, and we can see that as we go up to View, you see Proof Colors. There's also an option here that says Gamut Warning, and if we turn that on, it will show us in a color all of the colors that are out of gamut. These are colors that are beyond the capabilities of the printer paper combination, and these are the colors that are going to move. And remember, what a rendering intent does is it decides how those colors are going to move back into a printable space. So we can't make them print, they're out of gamut, but it's just letting us know that these are the colors that are going to change compared to what the camera was able to capture. So I'm going to turn off the gamut warning, and I'm just going to adjust the image the way I want. First of all, I am going to bring up the saturation a little bit. So let's go ahead and add a hue saturation adjustment layer. I want to bring that up. And also the right side of the image is a little too light for me. So I'm going to add a brightness contrast adjustment. I'm going to turn down the brightness, and then I'm going to fill that mask with black. And then with white, I'm going to paint back in at about 40% or so, and I'm going to let some of that darkness come back in. This will just do a better job of recentering us on the train. I'm also going to make the sky just a smidge darker. And if we turn this on and off, you can see what I just did. A subtle adjustment, but it does recenter you here. I can also conversely go into levels, make a levels adjustment. I'm going to brighten the whole thing up a little bit. And I'm mostly looking at the train. And again, I'm going to block out that adjustment, get my brush with white, and I'm just going to paint over the train itself. it just is going to refocus us on the train a little bit. So if we go back to where we started, there's our original, and there's where we ended up. Granted, it's a subtle adjustment, but now the image looks on the screen the way I want it to print. So now it's ready to print. And to do that, I simply go to File, Print. And once again, I do need to make sure that the settings are correct. First of all, let me tell it the correct printer. I need to click on Print Settings and make sure I have the right paper. It's not US letter, it's 1319. And we'll go to our Print Settings, which since we have our preset saved that we did when we were in Lightroom, we have that rag photographique sitting there. All of the settings are already correct. So I can just hit Save there, and in our print window, Photoshop shows us now the cropping. I just want one copy. Oh, and here's another important thing. We want to make sure that the color handling is set to our paper profile, not that the printer manages colors. That would just eliminate everything we just did. So we need to tell it Photoshop manages colors and dial in our printer profile again, which is right there. We also decided that we liked perceptual, and we do want black point compensation on. Everything else we don't need to touch. We're just going to leave that alone. And now I can click on Print. And once again, off it goes off to my printer, and we're going to have a print that's going to very closely match what we see on the screen. So let's get our two prints together and we can compare them. So I'm ready to unveil the results here. I went to full screen with my image. This is actually Canara Falls in Utah. I've got my print that we printed from Lightroom. And again, I'm not sure how well this is going to show up on video. We're looking at this under tungsten lights. So my screen is backlit, and you can see that the water here looks more yellow, and it's because of these lights. I can make this go away by doing one thing, opening my blinds. Now, sure, it's going to make my screen kind of blow out, but as we now hold up our print to the daylight, you can see that the water has gone back to its kind of bluish white. That's the difference when viewing a print under the correct lights. I've got a tungsten light above me, which was making it look yellow. When I bring it over to the sun, which is just coming through my window here, you can see now it looks like the screen, and that's how soft proofing works. You can even see as I bring it down, it gets a little more yellow. Bring it back up, it goes back to its white blue. So what this means is if you're going to be putting up prints, you're going to put up a print that you spent a lot of money having framed, you do want to make sure it's illuminated with daylight spectrum lights, not just a standard tungsten light. Now, your eyes will adapt. Even under a tungsten light, your eye will look at it and it will try to fix it for you. But if you're having a really fine art print done, it's a good idea to put some daylight lights illuminating that print. So here's our Lightroom example. Let's jump into Photoshop and see our Photoshop example. Here's our train shot, and we're going to have a similar effect happen. We got a beautiful result off of our print, but again, under these lights, this part anyway looks much greener or much yellower than what we're seeing on the screen. Once again, look at this. I bring it up into the daylight, and now it goes to a green. So that's just the ambient light that's having the effect on when you're viewing a print. So again, view your prints under daylight, and when you're paying to have a beautiful custom print made, illuminate it with daylight lamps. So that's the whole idea of custom paper profiles and custom printing on papers. When you have a custom paper profile, you're going to get the best results possible. View your prints under daylight lights, and you're going to see a very close match to what you see on your screen every time. I just printed one of these each. Don't have to print them again because they came out great. And that's the real benefit to having a custom paper profile for your printer. When you put together a color workflow for your own printing, I think you'll quickly find that printing becomes fun again. No more bad prints, no more wasted ink and paper, just beautiful results. Understanding how color works will allow you to get better results wherever your images are viewed. Take control of your color and share your images with the full beauty and accuracy they deserve. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this series, and I hope to see you online again soon. Bye-bye.